So, yeah, hi everyone. My name is Serj. I'm an Android developer at XING. And I want to talk about scaling in, let's say, an abstract way. So there won't be any code, but I'll show you through all the problems we went through for the last 2 years and what problems we have now and where we're going in the future. So what's this all about is that basically success of any product drives more development, which basically gives new services which bring new features, and with those features you kind of get more code, you start piling up your code base, which creates also like domain specific things. A good example would be XING. If you take our platform, you see events, news, jobs, and so on. So these are fully fledged products which can be also independent from one another, but they kind of like are all under this XING platform. And that basically domain specific knowledge brings like new teams which kind of know everything, and you have to deal with that. Like you grow, you definitely have to work with it. So this talk is about the fact that most startups, as XING was once one, don't think about scaling until it's too late. You just write code, you deliver, you try to like speed up your development, but basically what is happening, you're piling up stuff. And you probably sometimes need to develop in parallel, especially if you want to be the first on the market. And another problem, which is part of this talk, like I said, like loving the puzzle. If you look at most resources and talks from other bigger companies, even bigger than XING, they all say that they kind of solve this problem. And the fact is it's not true. If somebody tells you that they learned to scale mobile or any other product across multiple teams, they're lying or they're just insane, because there's no silver bullets, and that's kind of like was our mistake. We kind of took the information from the web, we tried to adapt a lot of stuff, and we ended up like in a very bad situation at one point, and we had to move on and kind of fix that stuff. So it's all about structure, yeah? How we started. We have this app, it doesn't matter, and we have these features which if you open on the platform or anything, you see like there's a bunch of them. And all of these features actually have teams which develop them independently. These are all like microservices based teams, so they kind of don't care about what's the jobs team doing, like when it comes to events and so on. And 2 years ago there was only one Android team of 3 people, and all of them were handling requests from all these teams. So in the end our backlog was with 300 tickets which weren't even handled. Like we couldn't even sustain that much of incoming information, bugs and so on, and even talking about any refactoring, that was like a no-go. Like any word like refactoring would create like, no, you have a feature to do tomorrow, actually yesterday, but you can do it tomorrow. So what we did, we said, okay, we'll give you an Android developer, we'll unleash the knowledge about the platform, and we'll create like these domain specific teams, like which is kind of a trend now. And someone even can have 2 if they want, and we call these DSTs, yeah, domain specific teams. So what that gives us is that we see the app as a stack of features, and we allow them to operate under their own domain space. So basically, if you open our Android project, you will see just package names for features, yeah, but also they work kind of independently from one another. Again, they also are required to maintain their instrumentation, so since they know what is happening, they kind of have to provide some test cases to make sure that other changes are not breaking them up. And they should be autonomous. That's what we in the end try to do. And if you look, basically, yeah, that's the features, but it's all like contained under a bigger thing. So I call it here container. You can call it whatever. It's basically the actual app module which aggregates everything. And logically, it has a dependency graph for dependency injection. It has some coordination logic, which they all share between one another. That's how, for example, our feed live stream page knows to write messages. Yeah, so it's just some abstract things and basically frameworks. And here where it starts, how it's built. The feature for us, it's basically the view part. You can implement it basically, and we use MVP, but MVVM or any MV something, just it's basically how we represent the UI to the user. Everything underneath is provided by the dependency graph, and the frameworks are basically internal and external libraries. Yeah, so it's nothing special. But by solving this one problem, like you have this cool architecture, the second question is, okay, you have another app, and you have a third app. What do you do then? And at this point, we decided, okay, what are like the main pain points? And one of the first one was the UI. So any application that comes up from XING has to be XING branded. Yeah, so that's why we basically created this self-sustainable component, which is internally released. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's basically a Android library that contains the XING theme, or the general theme of the company, general UI components that can be shared, and it has its own life kind of development cycle, which we'll come to later. Also tracking. So we actually use we as a big company, when you start growing, especially in Germany, if you kind of sell stocks or sell marketplaces, like where you display ads, you cannot just rely on internal tracking. You also have to rely on some additional tracking libraries that are kind of forced on you. So to avoid some problems, we actually have a special tracking library which is completely internal. It's aware only like how our Android applications work, and it's also distributed like internally with its own life cycle. And an API client which is actually open sourced. It's now in the stage of alpha. It's on GitHub, and if you actually want to integrate the XING APIs into your code, you can easily do that. And in this case, like for me, the second app as an abstraction, I think about the Jobs app, and they also use internal APIs, like they make calls which are to REST APIs that are not public, and that is actually depends on the API client, but we also have a job section in our app. So what we do, we basically redistribute another little library which is shared between those two applications, and it kind of like gives us some additional leverage. So we can share this way code, of course, styles, resources, and so on. We orchestrate all of this through special release cycles. So our main app goes for a 2 weeks release cycle, and these libraries actually have a much longer release cycle. So this is a little bit problematic for some teams because we're kind of forcing them to plan ahead some new UI changes, for example, or if you need to adopt some new tracking approaches or wherever. This way we kind of make sure that we go a little bit slower and don't rush things, you know, like you change and directly push to the main branch and you kind of break things on the go. But each DST is basically encouraged to contribute. How we work is that we don't say that you have this domain-specific knowledge and that's where you belong. We actually encourage people to work work throughout all of our products, internal and external. And this way, it's kind of like, if somebody gets hit by a bus, you'll still have other people that are aware of what he was doing before. So, but it also gives more ownership to other developers, and it's, for us, it's kind of important that everyone is part of the bigger decisions. So we have a thing called a Kaizen circle. So basically, we all Android developers meet on a regular basis, and there we actually make all the big architectural and like in general like tooling decisions based on some research that we do separately. That allows us kind of to never stick to one single brain. We share like a multiple organism. We're actually in Hamburg. We're already 15 people and we're growing. So all this architecture, all these like structural things are good, but they don't work without a proper infrastructure. And for us, what that means is how we actually work with the code, like how a feature or any contribution to any of these libraries or the main application or a secondary application, how it goes from an idea to actually a working thing that is delivered to the user. So we have a, let's imagine like a master branch on GitHub, yeah, so when a person wants to start a new feature or create it, it creates a feature branch. He can also like create additional stuff, like he can work on it however he likes, but then he has to return this to master. And a few things happen at this point. So for us to understand, master is our alpha, beta, and release. We don't create like development branches, version branches. We just go one straight ahead because it's really hard to manage, especially with so many teams. And that means that we have to kind of like circle around. We build almost, our CI never stops. We build almost every 2 hours when it comes to alpha and so on. Like I'll come to this a little bit later in more detail. And a contribution is, of course, a pull request where we just run some basic jobs. At this point, we run 3 jobs. So we check the code for health. We check the code for coverage, and we run the integration test on some emulators. And in like a nutshell, how it looks like, so you have one contribution, which is basically 3 jobs on Jenkins, which react on the pull request. Then you have another 3 jobs that are, they're scheduled, I think, every 2 hours at now. So we build the master, we check that the master branch is actually stable enough. We build an internal alpha, which is redistributed throughout the company. And we also run the smoke acceptance tests. Why smoke? Because when you end up with about a few hundred acceptance tests which require devices, you cannot like spend during daytime, let's say 2 hours just to run all of them. It's next to impossible. You're basically always creating this back pressure on your, well, we use a device farm, and this way it never stops working, and you actually kind of lose the control actually what actually was broken or when it actually broke. So then in the evening, we have a beta build, which is an aggregation of an all day's work, and also the full acceptance test, which run now about 2 hours on one single device. If you run it, we try to parallelize it a little bit, like, and of course, each 2 weeks or each 2 months, depending on what we're building a release with everything which is implied. So we use, of course, Jenkins CI for that. Another cool point about all these scripts, so for example, since we're trying to run in parallel the whole integration tests, acceptance tests, we script the jobs. So we have about 17 or 18 only acceptance jobs for each section and each complete feature, and writing a Jenkins jobs, like manually creating it and going through the whole process, and or even editing it, is a little bit crazy. So we use a little neat tool which is called the Jenkins DSL plugin. So if you're into writing build scripts with Gradle, for you it would be a finder's thing, like to run the same thing, only you write scripts not for your build tool, but for actually Jenkins. It actually generates the jobs, and it has modularity support, so any plugin which you can imagine of in Jenkins, you can actually find a DLC support for that. So it basically generates the XML that you would actually do usually manually. For integration tests, we use Espresso. That's kind of boring. Yes, a neat tool that you would maybe be interested is Spoon. It's released by Squared. It actually allows you to more better collect reports about your test suits, and it has a much better error handling or display opposite to the normal Espresso displays. And for acceptance tests, we use Calabash, which is a tool. Basically, it's also a domain-specific language. It uses Cucumber on the front side. On the downside, it uses Robotium, and basically, it allows you to write integration tests in a more human-readable format. What that means is that we try to ease the load from our developers to not write that many integration tests, and we put that thing on normal QAs that just write like the description and copy paste. So basically any non-technical person can write those tests. Even sometimes I think one of our POs already started writing user stories in description in these tests, so there afterwards are just copy paste into the feature code and just deploy it and check that if that actually runs. It's really neat. And we use a device farm for that. It's a neat tool. It's from OpenSTF. What that allows you to basically, using any computer you have, like we use a Mac Mini, and you can connect a bunch of Android devices to it, and not only parallel your work there, like we use them to run the final like acceptance tests during the night, but also what we do, since the device farm during the day is kind of like free, people can just connect to those devices without emulators and deploy their code from their computers. So more about that is you can follow us on Medium. So this talk is mainly like an abstract, but we already have a blog post about how to integrate the device farm into your general environment and how to hook it up with Jenkins. And we're gonna start from next month releasing monthly reports about how to use Calabash, how to use different steps of our whole ecosystem to actually scale your applications. But in the end, in the long run, you have to understand that it all comes to the human impact. So until the point where you actually work with your developers and collaborate with them, and you find this kind of balance, till this point you will probably always find problems with actually scaling. And that's about it. We're hiring. If you're interested, we have some Android positions filled in Hamburg, and not only, also in Munich. And if you're interested in any other career, check out the link on the right. And yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Serj. Serj asked for a longer time for Q&A, so don't let him down. Many, many questions, I hope.
Hi, thanks for presentation. Talking about the feature teams, do you believe in remote feature teams and how they can interact with each other? If yes, thank you.
So we actually have one remote feature team already. It's in Barcelona, and we're building one in Munich now. I do believe in that, but in the end...
No, actually I mean that the members of the feature team, they are in different cities, for example.
We have that already. I mean, one team has members from... well, if you can do that. That's with the modern technology. We actually have a remote presence device, and sometimes people that are sick, they can boot to it, and they're just running around. It's only in our main office, but who knows? That was one of our internal projects. It will work, but it will still create some problems. You sometimes need to be like together, because when a person is remote, he's somehow isolated from all these like little chats and minor discussions, so it's harder to react.
You just said you're hiring in Hamburg as well as in Munich, is that right?
Yeah.
In which city is it easier to find talent?
Nowhere.
Okay.
I have actually two questions. Question number one is, could you give us a little timeline from where you started with a big piling up backlog and up until now? And question number two is, how do you deal with those many feature teams if they have conflicts in their interests? Who is meddling them? Because one wants probably to plant ads all over the app, and the other one wants to remove all the ads or something like that.
Yeah, so regarding the timeline, it started 2 years ago. So that was the pain point, where actually the boiling point when everything was reached. We had only 3 developers in Hamburg, and at that point the company decided that we have to grow and we have to somehow redistribute these problems. So what started as we started hiring, creating these little DSTs step by step. So the first unleashed teams, we also call them, was the news feed and the content section, which is also called industry news. And that was kind of the first experiment. So we just planted people there, and we saw how they kind of react. We actually, at that point, what we were doing, we hired, I think we hired 3 new people, and we planted 1 new person, 1 old person who was actually working at XING for a longer time to kind of moderate the whole information. And afterwards, we started filling positions step by step and kind of normalize the backlog. Now it's only 50, at least in my backlog, it's only 50 tickets. So, regarding the second question, could you repeat it again? Sorry, I lost. Conflicts, yeah. So, well, there's no easy way to do it. We have a notion of needle mover. So it all depends on the priority. So technically, we're quite a friendly team, so before we actually do bigger change, we still kind of discuss it before. We have a common channel where we talk and so on. But when a team, for example, wants to be first in the release line, and then another one, there the decision is actually made by higher people. They just select which feature or which product is more important to hit the market first than the other one. But we actually had a few times that we were releasing, merging these things together and releasing to the market really fast.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It was really interesting. I also have 2 questions. The first one, do you share the Calabash tests between the platforms? Or are they purely for Android?
Yes, we start, well, when Calabash started, we started as an experiment, and now we share the mocking part when we make requests to our backend to create some mock data on the server and see if it's displayed, things like that. We started sharing it with iOS, yes.
Okay, but not the actual features aren't?
It's a little bit hard because structurally the apps are a little bit different. So we tried that, and it worked maybe 4 times out of 10, maybe like that. So we decided not to kind of bother with that.
That's what I expected. And one other question: how do you handle testing of releases? Because if you want to make a release and master is kind of moving on, how do you ensure that the release candidate is getting tested enough?
We have a notion of a code freeze. So that works only for our apps, actually. With libraries, it's a little bit easier because we always kind of like, we can patch them really fast if there's something wrong. But when it goes to the actual application, what we do, we code freeze master. So there's a point in time which is set every we set those points 3 months in advance. So there's a point in time when we stop master, and we don't allow for like half an hour any merges. We check that master, of course, should be stable. If not, we first create a release branch and force the teams to either fix their tests if a specific part is broken. We also kind of analyze who's actually responsible. And my team is allowed to remove features from the feature branch, from the release branch, if we find that a particular commit or two were actually involved in breaking the overall expected behavior. That kind of is harsh and cruel, but that allows us to not stop the release because of one team. Because in most cases, it's multiple contributions, and if one person breaks 15 people shouldn't wait for that. And we test about 3 days. After that, we release to a beta channel, and we have a beta program which anyone can enroll. It's all on our Android page. And after that, we just monitor the basic stats if we get new crashes or so on, and then we just do a stage rollout with the normal Google tooling that you have already.
Yeah, question here. How do you share the feature code across different apps?
That's actually almost non-existent. So we share business logic and basic lower level stuff, but we don't share the actual overall final implementation. That's still at this point is almost we now what we do is only slice the application and remove the lower level dependencies which could be shared, like for example the caching of your contacts on XING, or your user profile caching, which is a database and all needed functionality to actually store it. So we first started at this minimal level, and we still are not that advanced to actually go to the final thing. It's still in progress. We do share some business logic, like minimal business logic, like loading data, as I said, like calling APIs and basic models with other teams.
1, 2.
How big are your DSTs, and do you have QM positions assigned to each team?
Yes, that's to the second. But our DSTs are usually 1 to 200 developers plus a freelancer, depending on feature demand, let's say so. And each team has a QA. That's all. Huh? 200?
200?
Sorry. 200 developers plus a freelancer, and of course a dedicated. Yeah. We're only about 90 people now overall Android developers at XING. That's including Hamburg and Barcelona. So not 200. Sorry.
Hi, just a small question. If different teams are responsible for different sections of the app, how do you solve dependency updates problems? I mean, if you need to update some library in one section, then it should be synchronized in all sections.
Since they all share kind of the same configuration, where they all live in one model, so it's the upper application model. We didn't start we were actually separate at one point, but that didn't work for us because of the build time, which the guys from before lunch were talking about. Actually, we had something similar, and they kind of share the same build file with the same dependencies, but my team, where I work, we're responsible for updates. So when it comes for example, the most painful thing is probably updating the support library. For that we actually before we were just doing that, but now we're planning ahead, like sometimes even a week depending on the version. So I think for the 24th version will be really slow, because last time we did it, we broke our app. We had to patch it 3 times on live.
And how long it takes, the full build time in?
The full build time?
Yeah.
Well, depends. Like, since these little libraries is quite fast, so they're the full app is I don't know. I think a clean build now is about 1 minute or something, or 2 minutes, and recurring build is without instant run. It's about 30 seconds or 40 seconds. It's okay. It was worse. It was 10 minutes.
Hi.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the beginning that a lot of startups don't think about scaling from the very first stage.
Yeah.
In my mind, I have it a bit differently. I thought that the idea of a startup is that you get some money from investors, and the first thing on your mind is just to ship a product out the door to see how you're going to do. You don't want to get caught up in what is called the analysis paralysis and just spend all your time and money into thinking about how do I scale and then start building a product. And also this kind of approach seems to me that it's kind of like going against the agile way of developing products. What's your thought about this? When is the sweet spot on thinking about scaling your product?
Mm-hmm. So in my opinion and the general company's opinion is that of course you shouldn't, like when you're a startup, you shouldn't invest money on scaling, but I think what you need to understand is that you have to at least develop in such a way that you're flexible enough in the future. So what happened at XING, and that's like non-secret information, we were a startup. For five years ago, our app first hit the market, and since then the code base was basically never changed. There was never a complete rewrite of the application. There was never anything done with that. So basically there was like iteration after iteration. It was first slow, then it became faster, and so on. And what happened is that the company spent a lot of money just to make the app scalable. So we actually were 5 people, our main framework team, which we actually did this, and we're like kind of responsible for the app to maintain. So the thing is that you have to think about like when do you want. You don't have to like spend all your money in the beginning to scale it, but you still have to at least make sure that when you're developing, at least from your developer perspective, that you try to be as flexible as possible, so you don't kind of couple things together. Because in the future it will change. Somebody already on the stage says that tomorrow your code will become legacy code, the one that you wrote today. And that's true, and tomorrow something that scales today will not scale, of course, but you should be at least flexible enough. And regarding the agile way, all of our teams are conducted by a Scrum or Kanban. The only non-agile way is the actual infrastructure. So that's the only thing that cannot change, because otherwise, if we don't have these release cycles which are like strict, we will have releases and updates either like once in half a year or once every 2 hours. Yeah, so it's like we needed a structure somehow, which is of course non-agile. It's a little bit looks like waterfall, but it's just a point in time when we say, okay, here you can release. We're not doing it before, we're not doing it after. It's just a time that we like kind of allocate for you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. So you said that you're sharing business logic, so like pieces that multiple teams use. So what about resources? So let's say themes, styles, or like colors. So if different teams, they definitely need to build UI in the same style. So is it like global for everybody, or you bundle them somehow to make them available? So how do you do that?
So we have an internal UI library, which basically propagates global styles, which is the application theme and some basic UI components. It's done quite easy. We have like a Maven setup, and we just publish it there. And that's how all the teams kind of get the basic colors and theming, which at XING we don't have that many colors. We have just a few shades of green and one yellow. Yeah, so it's not that much. It's just like how it correlates and all these things. Yeah.
I think we have one more question here. Are there any more questions in line? No, I think we're going to have the final question. Yeah, there was one more. Okay.
Hi. How do you manage hot fixing? So if master evolves and then a critical bug is detected, how do you roll back features from master and apply the hot fix and release it?
Each release basically is a tag. So, okay, I didn't mention this on the slide, but what we do, during the code freeze, we create a release branch. If there are problems, we either roll back some commits or add, depending, but usually we try to stick it the same. Then when the code is actually out there and the final release testing is done and so on, what we do, we tag it. It's done automatically with the job. So when it builds the release, it's actually already automatically applying the tag, getting the mapping for the progward obfuscation stuff and everything. Like it all collects and it pushes it to Git. And afterwards, when we're doing hot fixes, we're not master evolves and we just check out the tag and we create a hotfix branch from that. And the same goes over and over. So since it's just versioning, yeah.
There was one more raised hand over here. Oh, here, okay.
You mentioned that your regular DST consists of one or two developers and one freelancer. And you also
may or may not.
Huh?
May or may not.
But you also mentioned that it's kind of difficult to organize the DST from the members who is located in different offices. So what kind of work you pass to the freelancers and how you organize the work with them?
Usually freelancers, we don't work with them directly. The main developer in the DST, like the main responsible for Android, is kind of not in charge, but it's his job to kind of control what he's doing. And usually freelancer is just a word for a person who will not stay for us long enough. Yeah, like not a year or two, but they are contributing on the same level as any Android developer. They also are part of our weekly decision-making process. So we kind of we don't isolate them from us that far away. They're just they're freelancers because they'll stay only for 3 months. That's the only difference. But we still treat them as part of the family.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still good in time.
Hey, do you have like a common check style or like a coding style, and do you enforce that somehow?
Yeah, with a job, with a Jenkins job.
Okay, so you're running check style, or what are you running there?
We're running check style. We're running lint. We also use findbox and PMD, but that's on a low level just to get like some overall. But what happens, like when you make a PR, as I said, we run 3 jobs. One is like checks the overall health. And that actually checks also check style stuff. So we basically enforce people to use the code style that we provide them. Otherwise the code will always look different, of course.
Okay, cool. And do you use the new Jenkins 2.0 pipeline with the GitHub integration, or are you still using the old Jenkins?
We're using the two Jenkins 2.0.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
We have 2 minutes left, so now we have the final question, definitely.
I didn't saw you mentioned a code review in your slides. Or probably I just blinked during this moment.
Yeah, we follow the 4I principle basically. So we actually, this is actually kind of cool. I don't know how I missed it. We have a random script. So the rule is like this: you're contributing a pull request. There's one person who actually aware of what you did, during this last this contribution. But there's one person who's selected randomly from the whole Android community at XING. So, and this way, actually, what we did, like by doing this for the last, I don't know, I think 4 months, we arrived at the point that everybody is aware about everything in the app. So, as I said, if somebody gets hit by a bus or dies in a plane crash, nothing will stop and the knowledge will not be lost. So we kind of enforce this. And the same goes with the Jenkins jobs, for example. You can edit a script in master and that will change the whole pipeline if you actually change the whole configuration. And we allowed to do that only to make sure that it works.
Okay, thanks, Serj. Thanks a lot. A warm hand again for... Yeah, you must be thirsty, you must be hungry, you must be